Okay, so apparently I'm going to play something and I'm going to talk about it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the way I used to play analog synthesizers in 1977 when I got my first analog synthesizer, which has been stolen by my brother, and it's living in Melbourne at the moment. And in those days, I would take it and I would get a Carlsbro analog delay, which is an English analog delay bucket brigade, and I would try and be like Brian Eno and Robert Fripp, doing the Frippatronics thing. And that was before I realized that Terry Riley and Pauline Oliveros had done it 10, 15 years earlier, but I was emulating Robert Fripp and Brian Eno. And from various times from then on, I still regularly do it. I go through periods where I'm extremely enthusiastic about it, and other periods where I just don't have time and I'm busy doing this, doing that. So I recently, well, in my Sonic Escapade group, sometimes I will start just playing by myself and the other people will come along and play. And I use this sort of system for doing that. Traditionally, I used a Mini Moog. What's the problem with Mini Moog? A, ridiculously expensive. B, too heavy. C, frown at it, it breaks. So eventually I replaced it with initially one of those. But I didn't like it very much. Don't tell anybody. Then later on I replaced it with one of those with a keyboard, both of which were made by Korg. And then eventually I replaced it not with where's the big one? The big one is too big. Yeah, I'm going to break something, aren't I? Yeah, I've just broken his keyboard power supply. I got one of these, specifically for doing Sonic Escapade. And it's very good for doing this Frippatronics approach. So what I thought I would do, I will build one of these sort of Frippatronics type things with the synthesizer, but I'll talk about how I do it at the same time. So it's kind of like a tutorial or kind of like a demonstration, but it will also show some of the capabilities of this and what you can do with the delay. Now, I am using a Strymon timeline for my delay today because it's got lots of knobs on it and I can easily control it in real time. What I tend to do is I don't use presets. I don't use presets because I can't remember where all the presets are. I actually have a PhD, which means I'm supposed to be able to remember stuff, but actually I can't. So I'm using this and I'm using it in a dual delay mode, and it's got one delay is twice as long as the other. And I control the number of repeats and maybe the filter on the repeats. I'll demonstrate that while I'm doing it. And the other thing I have here is called an Empress Reverb, which is kind of like a Blue Sky or all those sort of things. Similar sort of complicated reverb, but I tend to use it because it's got lots of knobs which enable me to usefully control things in real time so I don't have to remember. It has all these different modes and I just use the blue ones because that reduces the complexity, right? So I'm going to be using this as primarily another delay, but it's a delay I'll play with. I'll just mess around with it. I'll talk about that while we do it. And I will also use it for another effect eventually. So let's start. Oh, important, I have a volume pedal. So I've got control of the sound with my foot. I've also got control with my hands over here. Now, I'm using an ARC 2600M, and it's got 3 oscillators. It's got a filter. We've got 2 different versions of it, but essentially a filter, a VCA, and I have set it up so that it's a 2-voice system. One voice is, oh, what's happened here? We're getting the video. All right, it's a 2-voice system, and one is going through the filter and one was just going straight through the VCA, split up. There is another oscillator which is being used as a modulation source to make it go clangy and noisy. And an important thing about this, you see all this patching here? That's essentially just to make an LFO, because it doesn't have an LFO. You can use oscillator 2 as the LFO, but that's the best oscillator. That's got all the stuff. So you don't want to spend it on an LFO. So I'm actually going to do a YouTube video about how to patch this, but I haven't got there yet. So if you all go to my YouTube channel and subscribe and hassle me, I'll actually do it. Okay, I'm going to start. I'm going to start with playing some long notes. I'm using oscillator 2. I'm using a kind of a pulse wave. That's the sound. Oh. That's the sound of somebody playing with the thing and it's wrong. That's nothing. I'm going to put my little reverb on it. I've got reverb on here, but this goes a little bit crackly when I'm doing this, so I'm not using that. So I'm going to start playing with some stuff. So that's the basic thing. I can just... Let's put a bit of delay on it. Now I've got no repeats, so I do that and it fades out, but I want it to keep going a bit. I'll make more repeats. Actually, I'll leave it there. It's playing a drone now. So I played different things, it was happily. I didn't have maximum repeats. Now I've got maximum repeats. It's sustaining. Listen to the sound. Is it changing? It's not changing pitch, but the timbre is changing. This is different from a looper. A normal looper like you use these days, it repeats round and round and round and round and doesn't change. This one does. Now I'm going to lock it. I can actually turn it down a little bit. I can turn it down a little bit by just filtering it or decreasing the repeats a little bit. I'm going to filter it a little bit. That's enough. I'm going to lock it there. So now we're not using the thing anymore. I can play. Not going into the decay, into the delay. So then I can get this other delay. I might want to play a solo on top of it. For example. But I might want extra delay. So I have another one. obviously I can play along and I can use the controls of the delay, like the pitch, by changing the delay time I get a pitch shift when it's repeating, and the amount of repeats is determined by the amount of feedback. So back in the olden days we used to do that a lot with our pedals, our decay, and we would sit on the floor with our guitar pedal, make noises and twiddle with the knobs in the middle of a rock band. Pink Floyd has been known to do that. Radiohead did that on the end of is it Paranoid Android? One of those sort of tracks. So at the very end it's got this decay. So we're playing along. I better get going, it's getting later. So let's say I've got that. Now I want to change my backing. So I turn the delay on again. So what I'm doing is now being recorded. But I fade out stuff. I've turned the repeats down. I can make it fade quicker by increasing the filter. I played that a little out of time, so I can actually make it fade out a bit. So now I've got a different pattern which has got more animation in it, using that as a backing track. I could add some brighter so then I can play more stuff on top of it. It's actually a bit difficult to hear the time, but can you hear the time? Sometimes you can hear it easier than others. The big thing doing this sort of vibratronic sort of idea is that you never know what you're going to get. You can never predict it. So that means you're going to have to stand up and just do it, like I am doing it now, although I'm explaining it. So it means if I get it wrong, it's okay, you know. But yeah, it's going along happily, and I can actually follow on top of it. I want to make it a little bit more. Let's see how that evolves. It's going to be cooking away in the delay. It'll do something, and I can play different things on top. Play whatever I want to do, and then maybe I can add some different sounds like this. So I'm using noise to modulate the frequency of one of the oscillators, and it's giving this more like steam noise coming from a calliope or something like that. And I could solo away happily, and if I want to get even more wild, I can start adding FM. Because I have another oscillator here not doing anything. So I patched it into the frequency control of the main oscillator, and it just makes all these sidebands, all these different frequencies. And if I want to, I can do all sorts of stuff if I want to, and I can make it really noisy, and I can shape it dynamically. So you can use the controls to actually change the shape of the sound and use that as a type of expression. If I want to, I can even add it to my So now we've got lots of stuff happening. If I turn it off and go, I could creatively, if I was doing this in front of an audience, you are an audience by the way, but I'm explaining it while I'm doing it, so it's actually very difficult to get into the flow. When you do this, you normally go into this mental state where you're flowing, doing stuff, but I can't do that and talk to you at the same time, so it's kind of like, more of a demo. I've changed the sounds, and I was making something more noisy and percussive, and I ended up with too much. So I've got something like that. If I want to, I can add that. Randomly change the pitch. I have no idea what it's going to sound like. Alright, so I knew it was going to be up there somewhere, but it doesn't matter exactly what pitch. So now I've got doing all sorts of stuff. Go random, do all sorts of things. And that's too random for too long. So, I go back in, I set up a nicer sound. I'm going to use the other voice. And I've turned the feedback down. So now I've morphed the backing from being really noisy into something with a pattern like I did before. Then I can put another bunch of layers on it. What I can do, I can take my little reverb and use not a reverb. I can use a thing which they call beer. I don't know why they call it beer. You notice I'm playing two notes. because it has a low note and a high note. One voice, this one is playing the high note, this one is playing the low note. I'm blending them over here. And I can add things together, and I've also added pulse width modulation. So it's a traditional string sound, but enhanced by the reverb effect. That wasn't a very good one. Let's just record some of that. So I've ended up on a big chord, and then I can just fade it out. I'm increasing the filter and the feedback, and then it fades out to silence, and that is the completed thing.